Hello everyone and welcome back to a new monthly reading wrap up. We're going strong, 2 for 2 so far this year. No cheating today, as I might have partly done in the last month. All the books I'll be talking about today I finished before today. In February I read a total of 7 books and I definitely kept with the theme from January where I was very much in a romance book era. 6 out of the 7 books I read this past month have been romance books, either like rom-com or like just general romance books. Reading romance books definitely worked out anyway because for me February is the month of love. I will say the overall vibe I got from this month and the books I read was just love in general. There are definitely some books that are better at showcasing the type of different loves than others. But I will get to that once I speak about the individual books. I think this time around I'm gonna talk about the books in order by rating. So I'll start with the one I rated the lowest and finish off with the book I rated the highest out of all 7 books I read in February. So the worst book I guess that I read in February was Hate at First Sight by Lizzie O'Hagan. Now this book was an arc that I got from NetGalley. The book is being published 12th of September 2023 according to Goodreads. So that you guys know what it's about, I'll read you the info. They say it's a thin line between love and hate at first sight. Kate hates feeling out of control. Her incessant need to over-prepare has always served her well, yet nothing could have prepared her for today. Not only is she being evicted from her flat by her best friend, but now her boss has announced cost-cutting measures that will put her job in jeopardy. She may not love the company she works for, but she's worked too hard for too long to just give up. So she's ready to prove herself. The catch? If she wants to save her job, she'll have to work with creative, happy-go-lucky Harry, the one man she spent the last 5 years trying to forget. But what happens when that line you've drawn starts to blur? When I first saw this book on Goodreads, it was kind of sold as the enemies to lovers book that you don't want to miss. Now, I've said this previously and I still think it's true. You can't have a proper enemies to lovers story in a contemporary book. That's just my thought. You can have rivals to lovers, but they can never properly be enemies because you're never going to get that like I want to kill you vibe because it's real life. If you've got a fantasy, there might actually be that like will they kill each other, will they fall in love kind of thing. But in a romance book that actually takes place in the real world, it's just not possible. The book is titled Hate at First Sight. Now, the title and their hook for selling this book is so far off the mark. It's not even funny. Well, it kind of is. Overall, the book isn't horrible, but I had a lot of problems with it. What's going on with the sun? The sun is currently ruining my filming experience at the moment, so apologies if the lighting switches. I'll try to make the best of what I can do with it. To me, I don't think you really get that hate at first sight thing. Also, the fact that it's been sold as an enemies to lovers rom-com makes no sense to me because there isn't really much animosity between the two characters. It all seems a bit like too fake, and then once you get like into the story, like the love story that starts between Kate and Harry is quite believable. Like I was rooting for them at some point, but then I'd say once you get like 30 or 40% into the book, you kind of lose track of the romance plot of the book and then it turns into this whole other story. I can see where the author wanted to go with the story and with kind of the ideas that Kate and Harry had for the company and kind of what they wanted to do with the industry, but it felt a bit too forced in my opinion. And as the author had kind of jumped to start with these other storylines, you lost the romance plot in the middle of it. And when the book is sold as a rom-com, that's not really what you want out of a book like that. And so it was a bit disappointing to see that it just kind of went off the rails. So I gave the book 2 stars. I actually did read the book in like quite a short amount of time, so although it's easy to read, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the best read that you'll have. Now, another arc that I got from NetGalley that I read in February was The Breakup Clause by Neve Hargan. Fia and Benjamin know each other from when they did a summer camp in the States when they were 22 and 21 respectively. On a final drunken night together, they went to Las Vegas with everyone else that they had worked with over the summer, and they got married in Las Vegas. They planned to only stay married for a year and then get a divorce. And 8 years later, that hasn't happened yet. So when Benjamin shows up at Fia's office in New York, she gets a bit of a backlash because now she's suddenly dealing with an intern working in her office that's actually her husband, who she's been trying to divorce for a really long time. And so dealing with this, they obviously know that there's a lot of complications with their relationship in the office. So they decide to like not mention it to anyone. Now, I did enjoy Fia and Ben's relationship arc, like how they kind of got reacquainted with each other and stuff like that. But at the same time, it wasn't anything special to me. I think overall the book wasn't really bad, but there are just certain plot points that I didn't really understand and they just didn't make sense to me. I'm not really sure how to feel about the whole office romance thing. It's kind of weird in my opinion. Although Fia wasn't necessarily Ben's boss, he was still an intern, and like they did know each other and had like a sort of relationship from before, but that was like 10 years ago. So kind of strange. It was quite a strange book, but I did give it 3 stars, so take from that what you will. Another book that I also rated 3 stars in February was Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you will already know that I have a really weird relationship with the Magnolia Parks universe. This is the 3rd book in the series altogether. It's the 2nd book about Magnolia Parks and BJ. I will say going into this, I didn't have very high hopes. For those of you who are not familiar with the Magnolia Parks universe, it's basically about Magnolia Parks, who's a socialite in London. She's 24, I believe, in this book. I think when we meet her in the first book, she is 23. And she has her whole group of friends who live in London. They're all either gang lords or just rich people or just kids of rich parents. Think of it as Gossip Girl but set in London, and there's not actually a Gossip Girl, but it's the same kind of group of people. The reason why I didn't particularly like the first book in the Magnolia Parks books is because I didn't like Magnolia. She comes across as a very self-centered person, and she clearly does care for her friends and relatives. Anything outside of that, she has no care for whatsoever. Her relationship with BJ, who is her love interest and soulmate, it seems like, they are going around in circles forever. It's so much push back and forth between them whether they will actually end up together, and the book is written in a way where like their whole relationship is like they're written in the stars. They're meant to be together, and yet you have so much back and forth between them. It gets very repetitive and at times too much. That's kind of how I felt from the first book. I will say, for the first 200 pages of this book, I didn't hate Magnolia Parks. I think that's progress on my part. And I know at the end of the day, I don't have to love Magnolia Parks. That's not a necessity for me. She's a book character, let's be honest. In the first 150 to 200 pages of this book, you get a lot of answers to questions you might have had in the first book. And a lot of the answers that you get help explain some of the things that, first of all, happened in the first book, but also some of the characters' reactions to a lot of things. When you kind of do get the answers, it's a lot easier for you to understand why Magnolia Parks and BJ are the way that they are. That being said, once I got past that point and I'd started to like Magnolia Parks again, I then get a little bit annoyed, because then we got the same vicious circle again in the middle of this book. However, the appearance of some other characters Julian hates definitely helped this book so much. In the end, I did enjoy this book more than the first one, which is why it should maybe get like a 3.5 status. But then, did I enjoy it as much as Daisy hates? I don't know. So I might bump this one up to 3.5 stars actually, thinking about it now. Although my feelings are a bit mixed, I'm leaning more towards love than hate. But also think it's a case where I just love to hate them. I am, however, excited to read the second Daisy Hates book, which I'm hoping to read next month, because you get a sprinkle of what's going to happen in that book in this one, but you don't actually get to know what's happened, just like a couple of things, and quite excited. Now, I did mention that I'd read one fantasy book in February, and to no one's surprise, if you watched my reading vlog, which I will link up here if you want to watch it, that book was Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. This book is the final book in the Lost Hours trilogy, which is a trilogy set in the Shadowhunter universe. If you're not familiar with the Shadowhunter universe, there's a lot of books, a lot of series, a lot of everything. I'm not going to speak too much about this because I have a vlog that's over an hour long if you want to watch that. The vlog does have spoilers in it, so there is a spoiler warning for that, just to be aware if you don't want to watch a video about it and be spoiled. But non-spoiling thoughts, I did give this book 4 stars in the end, as a conclusion to a trilogy that's been very much hyped, and having to wait 2 years for the final book, I was slightly disappointed by the ending. That being said, I did enjoy the book and the characters, and I do think this trilogy will always have a special place in my heart, but this final book has nothing on the first and second book in the trilogy. If you want to read any of these books, I would recommend reading the Infernal Devices, which is one of my all-time favorite trilogies, and to me the best books in the Shadowhunter universe. But I would recommend reading the Infernal Devices first before you dive into the Lost Hours, because you get more context, and also it's easier for you to love the characters because you already know a bit of the background for the story. But as I said, watch my vlog if you want to see more of my thoughts on the book, and also like just me crying over it, because there were a lot of tears, like a lot of them. Another book that I rated 4 stars in February as well was Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola, and guys, when I speak about this book, I personally don't know how to like explain to you how much I enjoyed this book. If you're not familiar with the book, I will read you the description because I'm just not great at describing books, to be honest. Sharp-tongued and secretly soft-hearted, Kiki Banjo has just made a huge mistake. As an expert in relationship evasion and the host of the popular student radio show Brown Sugar, she's made it her mission to make sure the women of the African Caribbean Society at Whitewell University do not fall into the mess of situationships, players, and heartbreak. But when the queen of the unbothered kisses Malachi Kored, the guy she just publicly denounced as the wasteman of Whitewell, in front of every Blackwellian on campus, she finds her soul on the brink. They're soon embroiled in a fake relationship to try and salvage their relationships and save their futures. Kiki has never surrendered her heart before, and a player like Malachi won't be the one to change that. No matter how charming he is, or how electric their connection feels. But surprisingly entertaining study sessions and intimate late-night talks at old-fashioned diners force Kiki to look beyond her own presumptions. Is she ready to open herself up to something deeper? I could not put that book down. I fell in love with Kiki and Malachi, and their relationship, the way that they just like bounce off each other, and the whole like college experience around them as well. Honestly, the author did such a good job at showing off the chemistry between Kiki and Malachi. From the get-go, the glances across the room, and like from that first kiss and then continuing on, all the different things that they end up doing, and like I honestly started tearing out at points because I was like, this is so cute. Like, I'm trying to tear up now. They're just so adorable, but also there's something so like raw about their relationship, I found, when they get to know each other better and then kind of opening up to each other as well, and not just having this playful back and forth that they do have. Reading this book has made me very excited to read Love in Color by the same author, and like any other book that she ever writes, I will want to read it, because if they're anything like Honey and Spice, I have to read them. I would highly, highly recommend if you're looking for a romance with fake dating and very, very good chemistry between the two love interests. Now, another 4-star book that I read in February, which was actually the final book that I read last month, was From the Jump by Lacey Walden. This author wrote The Layover. I actually don't know when the book came out, but I do know that I read the book in 2020 during lockdown when I was reading basically only romance books. In From the Jump, we meet Olivia, who's the main character. She is a graphic designer and works for a company, and she feels like she's stretched so thin. She never has time for anything other than her job. She barely has time to see her college friends, and when it's time for her college friends to go on their yearly holiday together, she doesn't join them as she's never done it before, and she feels like she has to continue her job. But this time around, she finds out that she needs to start saying no to things, and so she, on a spur of the moment kind of thing, quits her job, decides to go on holiday with her college friends. And so on the holiday, she gets in close proximity to one of her best friends, Lucas Dace. So she gets a bit closer to Lucas Dace, who's one of her best friends in her college group of friends, but she realizes that she doesn't want to ruin anything in their friendship group, and so she makes a pact with her friend that she is not going to do anything that could potentially destroy and break up their friendship group. However, when she gets back to LA, she finds out that a lot of things have fallen apart since she decided to say no to things, and she is again forced to be in close proximity to her friend Lucas, and things happen. And so she kind of has to decide whether she wants to take the jump and potentially risk losing her friends along the way. I very much enjoyed this book. As I said, I read it very quickly, almost in one go. I'd say like the group dynamics in their friendship group is very good and like solid, and it's quite fun when the author jumps back in time to when they first met in college and like other things that have happened since then but in the past. And also the relationship that kind of blossoms between Liv and Lucas is very believable. They've been friends for 11 years, so but it's kind of friends to lovers, I suppose. There wasn't anything special about the book, as in I finished it and thought I'd read something I'd never read before, but at the same time it was a very enjoyable read for me, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. If you just want a book that you can like enjoy for the fun of it, this book is definitely one that you should pick up. The final book that I read in February was Beach Read by Emily Henry. Mel from the Booksmell had it on her TBR, and I was like, oh, I actually really want to reread it, and I saw on Libby that it was available to borrow, and so I was like, you know what, why not? Although I didn't have the best experience with People With Me on Vacation, Beach Read is one of my all-time favorite books by Emily Henry. I know, like, out of the 3 books I've read, that doesn't say much, but I just have so many fond memories of reading Beach Read, and having reread it now, I remember why I loved it so much. The first time around when I read it in 2020, in the book we meet January Andrews, who is our main character, and for the summer she is going to her recently deceased father's beach house. She then finds out that her neighbour is actually Augustus Everett, who she went to college with, and who's, I guess, her opposite, to say the least. Whilst January writes romance books, Augustus writes literary fiction. I think it's described actually, whilst January writes happily ever afters, Augustus kills off his entire cast. Although they're both writers, they are currently both dealing with writer's block, and so one evening they decide to strike a deal in which Augustus will have to write a romance book which will end in a happily ever after, whilst January will write a literary fiction book. Over the course of the summer, as they are writing respectively the other person's type of book, January takes Augustus along to romantic dates, whilst Augustus brings January along to some very strange interviews to show her how he researches for his kind of novels. Based on the contract, finish the book and don't fall in love. Now, I can't tell you how much these characters mean to me because I don't think it's physically possible. When I finished my reread of the book, I literally messaged Mel and I was like, if you don't like this book, I'm not sure if we can be friends anymore. There's just something about January and Gus that makes my heart so happy and filled with joy, and just the book in itself as well. It's not just the relationship that January and Gus have, but it's also what you get to learn about both characters as just themselves. As I mentioned, the reason why January is in town and staying at this beach house is because of her deceased dad. Because of some news that was revealed to January very recently, she's having a really hard time dealing with her father's death, but also dealing with the fact that she can't ask him about things that were revealed to her after his death. And so that whole plot line is, although at times difficult to read, it's also so well written, and I just love this whole book with my whole heart. I don't actually know why I haven't rated this book 5 stars, because it is one of my all-time favorites. I don't know. I told Mel actually that I need to reread Book Lovers, which I have rated 5 stars, although in my head Beach Read is my favourite. So I do think very soon I will have to read Book Lovers so that I can properly compare the 2 books and see which one is actually my favourite. So that is my February wrap up. Overall this month I had a good reading month, I'd say. I read some books that were great, some books that were a bit disappointing, and some books that were very strange. If you guys read any of the books that I read last month, please let me know and tell me what you thought. If you have any other books that I read last month that you very much fell in love with and would like to recommend, please do recommend them down below in the comments as well. Other than that, I do hope that March is a great reading month for you all, and until next time, happy reading!